So I'm going to go ahead and bring this meeting to order, this regular scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on October 16th, 2023. First is consideration of the Planning and Zoning minutes for a meeting held on September 18th, 2023. Entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move.
Second.
Thank you.
Waive the reading.
Thank you. We've got a motion to waive the reading. We've got a motion, two motions. So we're good to go here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is public comment. Amy, I do not see anybody, so
No, sir.
continue to move on.
Some guy sitting over there.
Yes. Yes, I do want to,
With the public now?
thank Councilman BJ in the house tonight with us, and we really appreciate Councilman BJ to be here. Next on the agenda is discussion of Article 1105. It's mobile homes ordinance. I want everybody to know that I've got on the phone here with me our attorney Greg Tucker, and I was about 5 minutes into the conversation with Greg and realized that I probably should just ask him to come to get on the phone with us. So Greg, I appreciate you joining in, and I promise not to take a lot of your time this evening.
Okay, I thought we were talking about chickens.
No chickens this evening, I'm sorry.
You're chicken, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm chicken. Yeah, I'm chicken. So no chickens this evening. But we are talking, and as I went over to speak to Greg last week, you know, I talked to him about the wishes of this planning and zoning and how we discuss tiny homes, and we're really just not in a spot yet to approve the real tiny homes that are really small, that you're starting to see pop up in places, not necessarily in Summersville, but in other areas. We discussed and we came up with minimum square footages. I think we like that. We also discussed the removal of M1 and 2 and those areas that those two are affected by. We wanted to eliminate those. Was there anything else that you guys had questions on that I'm not mentioning? That's about it, right? And the big dilemma for us, Greg, is where do we put and how do we go about doing that in those ordinances? I mean, do we just address it? We went a couple different ways. I know you and I discussed putting in a minimum square footage in every single zone, which would be in the R1, R2, R3, and also in the commercial zones, and handling it that way. And then you had mentioned even doing a tiny home ordinance of some kind. So what would be your recommendations?
Well, I mean, we can do, first of all, I don't think it works in your mobile home ordinance because these are, some of them are, and on wheels, and some of them are not. And as you saw in the sample ordinances I sent you from other cities, they treat them differently. The ones that had wheels were classified as RVs because they could move them, and the ones that didn't were set on permanent foundations. So I think if you're going to do, I don't think it works necessarily in your mobile home ordinance, but I do think if you're going to do a minimum square footage, you ought to do it in each individual zone in the city and put a minimum square footage, just like you have a minimum lot size. And you can do that for, in terms of a dwelling or dwelling type building, having a minimum square foot of whatever, the recommendation is. I think in the long run, and I think where you should be working on this is really towards a tiny homes ordinance like those that I've sent to you.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably more of a complicated issue than it seems at first blush, as you can see from those, our discussions and those different ordinances that I sent to you. But right now, frankly, you can put them anywhere.
Okay. It seems simpler to just put them in each zone as far as the minimum square footage, and then you're handling it in every zone. but there's
Well, it has
no,
to be, yeah, you have to do it in every zone because every zone has residential, you know.
Development standards.
yeah,
You know, and one of the other things you need to consider, even if you put a minimum square footage in it, let's say, you know, somebody has a 5-acre plot in town or a 3-acre plot in town, if you have a minimum square footage in there, as long as you meet your setbacks, you could have 4, 5, or 6 of those set up like a little mini subdivision. So, I mean, I think, you know, you have to look at limiting if you want, if that's the route you're going to go, 1 per lot or 2 per lot or whatever the recommendation is. And that's why I think you need a tiny homes ordinance. I mean, if you put a minimum square footage in your individual zones, that still doesn't stop somebody who can meet those from putting 2 or 3 or 4 of those on a lot. For instance, my lot downtown, I can, you know, if I can meet the minimum square footage, it's central business, so I don't have to worry about setbacks. So I could set those up, you know, as many as I could fit on there, and you know, I don't think anybody would want that.
it's a good point.
Then you have to differentiate between the ones that have wheels, because there are, you know, they can be classified as RVs, because you could bring them, you know, put them on, take them off, and those that are going to be set up on a permanent foundation. I would think you would want to, if you're going to do it on a permanent foundation, and then have to meet, of course, the building codes.
Okay. Questions?
Greg, in R1, R2, and R3, it does specify a single-family dwelling, right?
I don't have it in front of me, but I think at least in 1 or 2 of those it does, yes. But these are, you know, they're not used for family, you know, not used for families.
They're more like Airbnbs and things of that nature,
Yeah.
rentals.
Daily and weekly rentals, and we do allow that. And, you know, if they treat them as Airbnbs, you know, we have that problem under the home rule ordinance, as Gary and I talked about the other day, that we can't regulate those.
But we can regulate the number of homes we want to put on a piece of property, yeah, and what size that property would be.
As long as you treat those the same as you would a rental unit. That's the distinction. I mean, it's crazy that that's in the home rule. You know, if we were home rule, we could do it, but we're home rule, so we can't do it, and that's the quirk of that statute.
Right.
Well, Greg, is there any problem with us specifying in each one of our zones that there can only be 1 dwelling?
Well, I mean, well, you know, I'll use my land as an example. I have almost 4 acres, and you know, I think there'd be a problem. Somebody tried to tell me that I couldn't put 2 houses on it.
So you don't think there's anything in our ordinances that would prohibit somebody from doing that now?
No, I don't think we have anything that would prohibit it now, especially since we're home rule.
Yeah, and as long as they meet those setbacks.
Yeah.
But you think we could if we wrote it up that changing each one of the
Well, I still think you're going to run into problems with the number, because we don't address that at all, the number of dwellings. As long as you meet the setbacks, you know, you can put as many dwellings on a lot as you can fit. Now that doesn't mean in these subdivisions where they have deed restrictions, and that, you know, that's another can of worms. But you know, those deed restrictions prohibit more than 1 single-family dwelling on a lot. I don't have deed restrictions, so if I can meet the setbacks, I can put as many as I can fit on here.
You're saying that as long as it's 1 family per dwelling?
Well, because they're not using them as like a traditional dwelling. They're using them for weekly rentals and overnight rentals. So it's it runs into that Airbnb issue. That's what I mean. Gary and I kick this around a good bit. It gets, you know, the deeper you get into it, the more complicated it gets. That's why I think you address it with a tiny homes ordinance.
What would that tiny homes ordinance look like? just off the cuff?
You know, you'd have one, you have to differentiate between the RV versus the fixed foundation. You could limit those in the tiny homes ordinance to one per lot. They don't have to be real detailed, but you know, there are some things that you would want in there that you probably can't get in your regular zoning by just limiting the square footage.
I see. So you can define sizing of lots, like you said, you could do one per lot, and then you could define what that lot would have to look like.
Yeah, you've got, yeah, that's where, you know, you have to be careful on how you draft it.
Right.
But yeah, I think you can. Now, you know, the old part of town, and I don't mean that the way it sounds, but the historically older part of town, you know, a lot of it isn't divided into subdivision lots, or you know, town lots. You know, there's a lot of that were on the outskirts of town back in those days that were part of farms, and they, you know, they just got sold off in parcels.
Right. Yeah, he may have something there. I mean, I wouldn't want to limit somebody like yourself. I mean, if you have 4 or 5 acres of land, I wouldn't want to limit you just to one. I mean, if you wanted to, at some point in time, put a daughter, not that you would put a daughter up beside you, you know, and your lot would meet the setbacks, I wouldn't want to prevent you from being able to do that.
Well, you know, we're getting an older population, and I think you're going to start seeing some of that where people are going to move back onto the, you know, to be near their parents, help with their parents.
Yes, I
And
agree.
that would prohibit that,
Agree.
or could prohibit that.
Right.
I think you're going to run into some pushback if you try to tell somebody that they can't put, you know, another house, you know, on their property if they can meet all the other setbacks.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, if they're not using it, you know, if they're using it for weekly rentals and things like that, that's just a different situation. Actually, that's more commercial use than it is residential use.
Right.
But that's where you run afoul of the home rule statute.
Yeah. Well, I've done what I thought I would do, Greg. I've got the same look on their faces that I had when I was in your office. So I have
We thought we
accomplished.
had it fixed.
Yeah, I was accomplished. Yeah, they thought they had it fixed. I thought I had it fixed. And then we get over there, and I said, but their faces look exactly like mine did the other day. So I've accomplished what I needed to accomplish.
Well, it makes you think. You know, it seems at first, you know, thought as a fairly simple issue, but you know, one question leads to another question, which leads to 3 questions.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the thing to do is to copy some of those that I've sent to you and let them look at what those tiny home ordinances look like,
Yeah.
and you know, start thinking in that direction. I don't think, you know, just a minimum square footage out there really solves necessarily the problem. It might solve it initially, but it's not going to be a long-term solution.
Why wouldn't it be, Greg?
Well, if you say you can't, it doesn't solve the problem with how many you can put on a lot. If you meet the setbacks, you know, I can put 4 or 5 on my lot, meet no setback requirements, and I don't think that's the intent. I don't think that's what anybody wants to do.
No, I'm referring to the tiny homes, I guess.
Oh, I think you can limit it to, you know, 1 per lot, 1 per, you know, so many,
Acres or.
you know, or half acre, quarter acre, you know, what you do is you set it, you know, if you're going to have a tiny home, you have to have a minimum yard size or something along those lines.
Well, and I may be stretching this too far, but why would you not, if you could put five dwellings on your property, as of a 4 acre property, why could you not put 5 tiny homes if they meet the minimum square foot requirement?
Well, you can limit because of I think you do the minimum square foot and you do the requirements for how big the yard has to be. Jimmy, I think if you look at some of those ordinances that we dug up, I think you'll see how they address that. We're
Okay,
not gonna reinvent the wheel on that, frankly. I'm not gonna go, Gary and I are gonna sit down and draft one. We're gonna take the best parts of 2 or 3 different ordinances and try to put one together if that's the route you're gonna go.
Some of those square footages on those, tiny home ordinances are really tiny. I mean,
Well, the
they were,
typical size of that, I think, 200 or 300 square feet.
right. So in
Maybe
those
not even that
ordinances,
big, 10 by 10 would be 100 square feet.
right. That's why I wasn't really for those at all, well, I see what he's trying to say with them though, too. You can take them and sort of mold them into what you picture that you want, whether it be one dwelling per half acre or whatever it may be. And then you can decide on square footage. If this commission wants to be at 940 or 960 or whatever, you can kind of mold it to be that.
And I think what you're gonna find is, and I used my lot and put, several as an example, but I think what you're gonna find is what the typical situation is gonna be is somebody has a decent sized yard, they wanna put one on the backyard to kind of supplement their income.
Right.
Greg, are there any, is there any legal action been taken on this that you know of so far?
No, not that I know of.
Okay,
And it's, in West Virginia, it's fairly new. I think all of those ordinances we found were just enacted last year or two.
okay.
But there's other areas around the state that are really struggling with this. I know my hometown of Parkersburg is dealing right now, the city council was dealing with some ordinances that were revolving around people with, mobile homes and RVs and things like that, where they're taking them and parking them around town and living out of them and things of that nature. So they're dealing with some of this too.
Well, and I think you need to get ahead of it because with the state park designation, you've got the New River issue. I think that's, what Fayetteville's experiencing is going to be pushing this way because they're just out of room over that way.
Yes, absolutely out of room. It's coming.
Greg, would we need a separate ordinance, a tiny home, separate ordinance, or could we just build all this into our regular R1, R2, R3?
Well, I think you're better off with a tiny homes ordinance because, you're going to get awful complicated in your R1, R2, R3s because, and even in your commercial districts because of the need for people to have, to put, if they want to build a second house on their lot for a family member or whatever. And not a tiny homes, and you're going to have a conflict there. I would be afraid of.
BJ, if it wasn't for, your yard is a great example. If it wasn't for deed restrictions, you have a lot there that could easily put a couple of tiny homes on the side lot there.
And I'm not sure he has deed restrictions because that's across the street from mine, and this was all part of an original farm.
Mhm.
You've got the Campbell, they've got enough room. The next door, the old Tom Marie's house next door, where Joe Young's, of course, they've pretty much used all their land with Stephen, but all of that was originally, and I'm not sure BJ has restrictions, but all that was originally outside of town.
Okay.
But I think you run across the street there, I think you did.
Okay. Well, he's taking notes now.
He's thinking,
There went my property
Whether he has
value.
restrictions or not.
Well, and there
Because of the size
is, like, here's one for
I
sale.
I'm inclined to think he doesn't, and maybe Jack Klein doesn't either.
Well, and his is pointing out toward Webster Road. It might be different. I think I have deed restrictions.
But the thing
Yeah, I think
is,
you
they're
do.
even
Yeah.
parking it.
So he's right there on that edge,
as
maybe.
Airbnb. Mine for
I knew I should have bought that lot from him.
but we have no control over
24-foot long.
deed restrictions.
No, we don't. No. I was just using him as an example.
Oh,
If, like, he has a great side yard.
yeah,
If he doesn't have any deed restrictions, then he could easily put 2 places right there.
Oh, probably more than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
what's square footage?
Oh, yeah.
8.5 by 24.
Yeah. 8.5 by
So
24.
less than 200 square feet.
He could put 6
I
of
think
them right there.
960 is too much.
Huh?
I think 960 is too much.
But see, they're even marketing this to buy it like for an Airbnb.
Yeah.
It's on wheels too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think everybody in the room, I don't want to take much of Greg's time up. I think he's got us enough to make it to 7 o'clock, that's for sure. But I think everybody in the room should see now that there's a little bit more to it than just, I thought that we would just be able to put that minimum square footage in there and we'd be done. But I'm glad Greg brought some things up, because eventually I could see us having some more issues down the road if we would just do that. I think we probably are going to have to address some other issues too. So it just got a lot more complicated than I thought.
Well, it's a complicated, simple issue.
Yes, you're exactly right. Exactly right. So, any other questions for Greg? None? Greg, I really appreciate you jumping on with us
One
tonight.
question for you.
Yes,
We have the annexation before the commission Wednesday. Are you going to do it by phone or are you going to come down?
I'm going to come down. Hey,
All right, I think it's set at 9:40, but I wouldn't plan on it happening at 9:40 because the prosecutor's going to be there to represent the county commission, and I think he's tied up until 10. So, you may sit there for 15, 20 minutes, but it shouldn't take long.
okay, so what time should it be there?
It's set on their calendar. They're attended at 9:40.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, I'm coming down. Do you need the original, or do you have the original?
I've got them, and they have copies of everything, and it's all ready to
Okay,
go. I've got the
fantastic.
originals.
Thank you, Amy. I knew she emailed some things. I didn't know if you needed an original or anything like that.
She was kind enough to bring them up to us Friday.
Awesome.
We have,
Okay.
they're on my desk.
They're on Craig's desk, he said.
Yes,
Okay. So I'll see you at 9:40 Wednesday.
Wednesday. All right.
Okay.
See you all.
Thanks, Greg. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And bring down,
Yeah, bring some donuts.
You want something approved, right?
Yeah.
Gets close.
So-
Yeah.
Now we see it's changed a little bit. And what's your all's fault or thoughts on that?
I would like to see the ordinances that he found.
Okay.
So we can look at those.
Okay. That's fine. Hey, Amy, if I were to email these to you right now, could you print them for me?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I was shocked by the size that some of them are using. I mean, that's the reason I didn't go with it at all, because I bet what he's saying is we can structure them the same way
Use that as a base and,
and then plug in our
yeah.
numbers, so. But the floor is open to discuss.
Well, I'd like, is it the thinking on this commission that we don't allow anything other than less than 960 or whatever it is, square feet
Yeah, that's what
on the lot?
we discussed in the last meeting.
I think there was some agreement on that.
Yeah.
The only issue you're gonna get into, you can make a tiny home ordinance. You say it's 960, that's not a tiny home anymore.
Yeah, that's my,
That's what I mean. Is that what we want or not? I mean, that's the question. My
What
question.
I'm saying is, if you sit down and make a tiny home ordinance, and you make it 960, then the 960 is not a tiny home. So, do we need to have a tiny home ordinance?
Not unless you're going to allow them. I think. I mean, if you're going to allow them, I think you need a tiny home ordinance.
is our tiny, I missed the meeting, I apologize for not being here, but are we saying that 960 to 940 square feet is the
Minimum.
size, the
That's the
maximum
minimum.
size of a tiny home?
That's a minimum size for a dwelling.
Gary, another way.
Which excludes tiny homes.
Well, and I think we also left it at, we would allow it case by case if somebody came to us with something else smaller, or if they wanted to do something different, if there was a piece of property, like I think somebody had mentioned, I think maybe Tim, up by the sport complex, if there was something up there at some point that would actually later develop, that might be something that could go to the BZA or whatever, but
Well,
the question I had, a couple different ways of looking at this. There's, in the R1, R2, and R3, there's an accessory structure in that ordinance as well.
Right.
And there's also group housing in that ordinance. Well, I mean, if someone already had their permanent residence, even if they had 5 or 6 acres, anything else they built on that property is considered an accessory structure.
Correct.
So without going directly into R1, R2, and R3, could you not just go into the accessory structure part of that ordinance and make some rules on accessory structures? And here's the thing, because if they didn't have a permanent dwelling on that property, then there would still be, they would still have to have square footage. Like, if you owned an acre and you wanted to put a tiny home just for you on there, I mean, you could have square footage requirements for that. But as far as you own a property and wanting to build a couple tiny homes on it, I mean, those would be considered accessory structures, and you may be able to go at it from that angle as well.
Yeah.
And then they have group housing. I mean, you know, more than one people living on the property. I mean, they have ordinances on that. We do in our city already. I mean, we may be able to look at that. Look at that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's always gonna be.
What are you looking at right there?
Yeah, but you
The
gotta
R1,
make that, you can make that down there.
Yeah, what does it say on there, which?
It has the setbacks and everything. Under accessory structures, it says no structure shall be located within the minimum distance of the front line to the building line. Principal structure, or structures on corner lots shall be located within the minimum distance of the front lot line to the building line of the structure for an adjoining lot on the side highway or street. Detached accessory structures shall be located at a minimum distance of 10 feet from the rear building line of the principal structure. They have all kinds of setbacks on there, but that's what I mean. You could very easily
You could
create a setback for an accessory structure that would limit.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that might be a good way to go about doing it.
And then you have a group housing that actually talks about planning and zoning. It said in cases where group housing, 2 or more residential structures containing multiple dwelling units are constructed on a plot of ground not subdivided into customary lots and streets which will not be subdivided, or where the existing or contemplated street and lot layout make it impractical to apply the requirements of these standards to the individual building units in such group housing. The application of the terms of these standards may be varied by the Planning and Zoning Commission in a manner which will be in harmony with the character of the neighborhood. So, I mean, I think there's a couple different areas in that R1, R2, and R3 without,
Zones, right?
you know, getting into the whole ordinance or writing the whole ordinance, that you may be able to address this in one of those.
Right. No, I think it's a great idea.
I think it'd be good to look at those ordinances that he referenced.
The ones that he said.
She's gonna print them off for
Oh,
you.
okay.
So
Cause
she's
it-
printing them right now, I just emailed them.
I mean, it's one thing to allow them, it's another thing to disallow them, to not allow them, so what's our pleasure, you know?
Yeah,
That's the question. I mean, if we're not gonna allow them, I don't see any reason to create
Well, I know
a
you
new
won't.
ordinance.
I know you won't allow what you're gonna read here and how they're written in other areas. I know you won't allow that. But I think you can see that, you know, what he was saying was take it, mold it to what you want. And like you said, I heard somebody over here say, it's not a tiny home if it's 960 square foot. So maybe it's called something else, I don't know, but.
That accessory, did it have footage, square footage in it?
It did not. It just had setbacks and stuff on the structure and where it could be built.
You might just need to put square footage in that, you wouldn't have to rewrite a whole ordinance.
Yeah, but an accessory structure would also be considered like people having
Storage
a
building.
storage building out behind their house or things like that. I don't know.
Can't outlaw those.
Can't
You're gonna vote for that, aren't you?
Well, I wouldn't want to.
But that's what I mean, that's kind of what that accessory structure part of the ordinance is for, or things like that. So I mean, you might be able to address
That's a good point.
tiny homes in that
Yeah.
portion.
I agree.
Anything used or suitable for living space or dwelling.
Yes.
You know, I mean, anything that's not the primary residence would be considered an accessory structure.
It'd be
I mean, there's
administrative.
already some here. I mean, over top of garages. Does Ashley own the garage behind her house, or does Lawrence keep it? Because, that's got a little apartment. Sure. And, and then I know up in Terra Estates, there's one over the garage that's an apartment, so,
Yep.
I mean, they're already here.
And there's one over there on West Street where the Taylors that used to own Grove's department store, Sherbrick House, they have a garage behind that apartment on top.
But it's a permanent foundation. And the thing that gets me is the one with the wheels. Because
See how
then
it just got
then you
complicated?
just allow your campers.
And we don't allow campers.
How many you gonna put in your yard? You're sitting there calculating, I can see it rolling.
He's got a wooded setting by the water.
Yeah. Along, 5 of them off right along Jack's yard.
Mhm.
They come back to review our R1, R2, and R3.
I'm not positive there's things in it as well about where you can build any type of accessory structures and things. I'm almost positive you can't build an accessory or have an accessory structure in front of your dwelling.
You can't. There, I don't know if it's in all the zones, but I remember people wanting,
Yeah, I think
like, if their house was here, it couldn't be in front. It had to be so
The
far
side.
set back to the side or all the way to the back.
I think that's it.
Because there was a couple of variances for even carports, that people had to get. And where that comes from is trying to back out and not having a view. And one way, like, we did it when we were kind of a BZA, but you could see through a carport, so.
Yeah, see, I was thinking whenever Greg was talking about how, he had enough property where he could fit several, but most of his property is in front of his dwelling, so technically you could, because I'm not positive that's a setback in residential zone.
One question I have that says
What-
it has to be complementary to
What's the
accessory
front of your
structure under
We have two
accessory
rooms, which is.
structure.
I can call my side for my backyard, my front
Or it'd be a
yard.
separate dwelling unit.
Yeah. I face Webster, but I.
Where is it?
Where your front door is, I guess.
It's an argument with my wife every.
I can let the back door, my front door, my driveway's at.
Whatever your address would be.
Yeah. See, my house is
Like,
There's only
Greg
two lots.
faces Webster.
middle, so is Timmy's house.
So you,
Where that.
And so is the house beside my
That's his
house.
address, that's all.
Her house is on 2 lots, she's on 2
I
lots.
would think the front of yours
I
is
guess,
what's facing.
So is,
the
uh,
Whitlock house.
Well, I
is up there, so they must be one about,
10 lots.
Turn it
it's
up.
like 4.5 acres.
I think 3.7 in it.
I don't know, I was really surprised.
Yeah, it's a big lot. BJ has a perfect setting with the creek and everything. He can build a pool out back, it's the perfect place
Computer
for a pool.
decided to do updates.
Yeah.
Computer.
Keep doing the updates.
Now, did Greg say that you and him were going to work on a draft?
Yeah, after we figure out what we want.
Here's something interesting, Gary. On their dwellings, no building in the rear of the main building on the same lot may be used for living purposes.
That's in one of these ordinances?
That's 1345.05.
Okay, read it again.
No building in the rear of a main building on the same lot may be used for living purposes in a residence district.
That sums it up right there.
That's scary. What's the other one if you can't put an accessory structure in front?
Are you on the city, our city ordinance?
1345.05.
And that's in all three? zones?
It says in a residence district. Ordinance 9368.
That may be one for him to ask Greg about too. That's how it sounds to me as well.
If you get something in front of
You
you.
see the square footage on this tiny home? 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a house.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was based on, is a single wide home.
Question?
That's what that 960 was based on, a single wide home.
That's a big single one.
Yeah. That's a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom.
Because most of these, tiny homes are well, 8.5 to 9 foot wide.
Well, the special ones
So
on
you
wheels.
so you gotta have 100, you gotta have a 100-foot long house.
Well, Sean Sullivan, out there around there, he's selling like a tiny home. They're about 16 wide, about this one, 25 feet. They're like 80 grand.
I saw that one, I thought it was a house, but it was a garage.
I didn't see it goes around.
He had one that was like a 2-story house, but he looked like a big commercial or something. You not see that one? You talking about right there at the grade school? That guy there?
There's one more.
Yeah, talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's a big building. It's just a carport.
It looked like a house up
It
there.
does.
Gary, did you see this one?
Is that what you read?
Yeah.
That covers it. I've never read that, that I can think of.
Yeah.
So,
So maybe you may want to write that one down.
write that one down.
That's in 1345.
134508.
The 5.
134505. Okay.
That's one thing we need to be careful about when we're doing this, making changes to one ordinance that contains somewhere else.
That's going to affect something somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, that's one problem we got in with the poultry issue.
Yes.
A little bit.
Yes.
Says one thing one place and maybe a little something a little different than another place.
Did you see this definition of a tiny home there? 4.5?
But there again, what size lot?
And then up here above it
That's
says
the
no,
thing.
My house has
no,
2.
no more than one dedicated sleeping area.
But like
It
Greg's,
really gets defined.
he would have a 4-acre lot. So,
That's you being rare, I guess.
yeah.
This is a pretty good ordinance here.
Yeah.
Here's your definitions here and stuff.
Yeah. And we're going to follow a lot of what they did. Like he said, we don't need to direct our own and reinvent the wheel. Some people's put a lot of work into these. You know,
This is,
it's pretty strong.
yeah, it's pretty restricted.
Yeah.
This one, I'm not gonna get a conditional use permit as well, just put one on.
Yeah.
Did the first copy we saw of an ordinance, wasn't it from Fayetteville? And they have trouble in Fayetteville, they said they couldn't find apartments to rent, they were
Yeah.
Airbnb, started out.
50 foot, they said 47
I
foot.
thought that's what it was.
You're using 8.5 as the width.
It'd be pretty long.
It's the next one that had all the
Most we can,
small
well, probably
size.
10 wide, probably. 10
A
wide.
single family home, 400 square feet or less.
I'd just say just go.
So that's how they're defining a tiny home, is 400 square feet or less.
About that.
And it's not have a
This here
kitchen,
says
a
that
separate
count the
bathroom, and a
walls,
separate
so you
closet.
can't count the walls.
What's all these
I saw
standards
that.
for? Says with only one sleeping area.
Because if you had a lot, you could get cut it back to
That means you're not sleeping on the
25 foot or
couch.
something.
No,
10 to 20.
This is a good one.
I like it. I mean, it's a good one. But
If you want to allow.
if you want to allow them, I mean,
That's the reason I say we want to
I
allow.
prefer to go the other route and try to
That's what I say.
work it with the ordinances, but Greg kept feeling that we were going to have issues. Any other thoughts? So I've got two things to discuss with Greg on what she found, what you were talking about, on accessory buildings. Structure, I mean, yeah.
What's the reference for accessory thing, remember?
1345.08.
You're talking about what Brandon was talking
Yeah.
about?
It is,
What's this, isn't it?
accessory structure 1345, yeah, .08.
Okay.
I think the only problem you're gonna run into with this whole thing is
Question the
it's
accessory structure
becoming
too,
a
because it says
commercial
complimentary.
rental operation. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if this guy thinks he can make, say, the pipeliners come back, he
Mhm.
can make $1,000 a month off of a tiny home. You know what I'm saying? And once it starts, it keeps catching on like fire. That's where your problems go on.
Yeah.
I think if Mary and Sam came here to help take care of grandmother 5 days a week or something, went back to their house on the weekends, that's a whole different story than it becoming a commercial operation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But how do you differentiate that in
Yeah.
your,
That's just it. How do you do
You
that?
can't, you have to
I mean,
eliminate it.
you'd have to differentiate it into, if it became a rental property, it became a business. If family was living there to take care of grandmother,
yeah,
that's different. That's more of a necessity type thing.
Then though, if that's on wheels, they just pull it out and it's over. But if it's not on wheels, then it becomes, what happens when grandmother passes?
Well, and that's the thing, you sell the house and that becomes, hey, it's a home
and I
office.
can make,
Yeah.
and I can make
Yeah,
$600 a month doing nothing.
Wow.
exactly. Thank you.
That's what's gonna happen, small business.
Paper in the city today.
Now, this one I think was from
This one's still
Minnesota or
warm.
somewhere.
10 cents a copy, do I have to pay for it?
Yeah, 50 cents a copy.
God, that's, talk about penning it down,
Minnesota.
15 pages.
You know, when we discuss, let's get our ordinances to where they're not complicated and anyone can understand them. Well, this one's a little bit more complicated.
I don't think we can.
One question I have is the complimentary to
Guys here.
construction.
That's what I was looking at.
Accessory
This
structure,
chart.
so
Yeah.
then this
How you fix how
complimentary
many,
construction.
how many blades of
That's
grass
not
you
a-
can have in your yard?
that's
Jesus,
not
well, that's a
work
Minnesota,
comp,
you don't
that's
have
more
much
of a
grass. It's winter.
house.
They got satellite dishes too, or part of it.
God,
Tiny home would be in a
Right.
house.
Right. Did they have a definition for that?
I
Raised
didn't,
down
that's what I
son of
was
a
thinking, I didn't see what
So
complimentary.
here,
I didn't see any
Sometimes it has a
definition.
definition.
I know,
They,
so-
not on this, I didn't see any. Just let me get.
It's easy to find, though. You just
somebody had
go
a lot
across
of
the
time on
street.
their hands, wouldn't it?
yeah.
Did you see this?
Our Jacobs are back here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they put an Excel sheet in and they've got it so that you can just, yeah.
There's somebody can define someplace else.
See, now, one thing this does have, James, remember here, if you go by where these go, some are permitted, some are conditional use, so that you do have that.
They don't have the definitions in this.
This thing, everything.
This one even listed temporary family health care
Right
work.
here. There's the definitions and the part.
Just gave us a new terminology to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the temporary service for your,
Temporary health care,
yeah.
wellness care, insurance you pay.
Do you hear that, Gary?
What's that?
One of these ordinances, temporary health care is one of the permits.
This is interesting for me
You
to
can
hear.
break it in, that was only temporary.
So the maximum size should be no greater than 50% of the building area of the principal building.
Yeah.
So if you got a 2,400 square foot house, you can do a 1,200 square foot building.
Yeah.
That won't work.
No.
I'm sure there's good provisions in there.
I personally think there's enough for him to work with right here with accessory structure and this other that we found,
Rear dwellings.
that we could address it in ordinances
Well,
or not.
even this, the one that you just now gave us, for Minnesota, that very first page is under their accessory uses and
I
structures.
saw
And I
that.
mean, they've got it beefed up a whole lot more than ours.
Oh,
They do.
you got everything.
But yeah, it kind of looks like they're addressing certain things in that part of the ordinance too,
Correct.
for accessory structure.
Correct. I think that would be the way to go. Because I don't see how you can have a tiny home ordinance, but call it 960 square foot. I mean, that's not a tiny home.
That's,
No, that's too.
It's just not a tiny
But
home.
it comes down to what, we kind of had that attitude now that we're 60 square feet because we didn't want tiny homes.
Yes, exactly.
And that's like what Jim said tonight, do we or don't we?
yeah, that's kind of the deal.
I don't think we do. We don't.
I thought that was the general feeling of this committee.
So we need to find a way to put it into the ordinance. And I think we found a couple.
Yeah, I think you could probably just go
I think so too.
with Greg and see what he thinks.
Exactly.
Then we can read these in case we do have to.
At this time, we're gonna sit down and let's make it work inside these two things here. And then draft something and bring it to you.
Okay.
And let you guys decide on
Can
that.
you email that to us,
What's that?
that accessory ordinance to us? Can
Um,
she email that to us?
Sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Something.
I'll have Amy do that. 13, if you could, email to their personal emails, 1345.05, and 1345.08. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then you guys will have that to read.
Yeah.
read through. Okay. Sorry I confused you and got your motors
The
running,
lawyers involved.
but I got an attorney involved and he gave me the same look that y'all gave me. So,
And Joe Boson said, bring it out to 10 minutes.
any other questions? I think we can leave it at, I will go to Greg and discuss these. I may even call one of you to go over with me if that's okay, and we'll sit down and have some discussion with him. And I think it's possible now that we've found these, that's a good find by Brandon and Sherry. I appreciate that, and we will get in there and dig in, and then if he comes up, I might just send you guys a draft, if he drafts something up for us, if we can draft, him and I can do a draft together, and we'll fire it over to you guys for your eyes prior to the meeting, so you'll have time to study it and look at it. Okay,
Thank
anything else?
Well,
You found something else?
you know, we were talking about this previously, I think you and I,
Mhm.
on 110502, factory built housing. It's part of this mobile home ordinance. On the second page,
Mm-hmm.
item D.
You guys have a copy of that, I think.
Yeah. Is that right?
What number, Jim?
Down the bottom of page D. Second,
Jim,
seven, five, eight, two, down. Second.
brought that up the other day and thought that maybe we should at least address it, look at it. Is it something that we want to address?
Well, that's where I think the term conditional use will come into play.
Conditional use.
Okay.
My question is, I mean, is that being done now? I mean, the ordinance says what it says. But, I mean, is that what we want to do? Manufactured homes, you look in definitions, it consists of single and multi-section homes, double wides, I suppose. This is application for use. Same for any purpose other than residential shall be made on a form or forms developed for that purpose and shall be submitted to planning and zoning for review and recommendation to city council. That means if you use, the way I read that, if you use a mobile home for an office trailer or whatever, that you have to go through a process. So, I mean, do we want that or do we not want that? I mean, that's a question. I don't think it's present being enforced in any way.
Right. No, it's not been, I mean, I haven't enforced anything like that. Nor have I haven't had anybody even address me with any kind of form of application or anything like that. So.
Yeah. That's what I mean. We want to have that in this at all or not. I don't know.
So again, it's one of those that if we want it, we want it, and if we don't, right, you just strip it. Or, okay.
My whole thinking on these ordinances, as we go through them, we need, you know, since it's been how many years since this thing's been looked at, and after we get through with it this time, it'll probably be that many more years until somebody else looks at it. Should we not look at it pretty thoroughly?
They all need to be cleaned up. Just
They
like
do.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. I kind of hate to leave something, you know, an ordinance that's got something in it that might be problematic.
Every time we get involved in one of the ordinances, it brings up 3 more questions.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You start out with 2 pages and you end up with a book.
Yeah, and not only that, you're talking about this, maybe you're talking about 1105.01, but by the time you're done with it, you've got 3 other sections involved with it too. So it's, it can get complicated, that's for sure. Okay. Well, Jim, I think it's the first time they've even looked at that. I think take that home and look at that one too. That's something that you like to look at.
There's a process, that whole section there that relates to that item D there, you know, the whole section there about the process there. You look at it over and see what you think. I mean,
We do not, I don't think we have a lot of that. I mean, I think we have some temporary structures. I know you guys have some temporary structure, but the plans is to build a dealership down there. So, I mean, you have some temporary housing similar to this, but I mean, the goal is to put that dealership down there and build that. So,
But they're in
Commercial.
C3.
Yeah, C3. Yeah,
It is what it
it
is.
is. Commercial zone.
I mean, should we make a distinction? I mean, it shouldn't be. Doesn't make any distinction in here between commercial and residential, so
Right.
should we?
What you're saying is it should be,
Maybe
we could allow it in commercial
Yeah.
and not allow it in residential, something of that nature. I mean, I would be in favor of that.
Just an idea, I don't know. Or allowed in residential with a, I mean, or commercial with a conditional use or a permit or something. Or review or something, I don't know, if you want to restrict it any. I don't know how big of a problem it's been. I'm not aware that it's been a problem, but.
I don't know why that's in there, because I don't know if you can put a mobile home in a residential area and use it for anything other than dwelling in it.
You can't. I'm almost certain you can't.
That's what I thought, so I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I don't know why it's even in there.
So
All right.
probably think about.
Okay. Any other questions? None?
More problems.
See, I'm almost afraid of bringing one more, it's gonna happen 3 more. You know?
We'll have to get rid of it here.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn. Got first, got a second, all in favor? Thank you.